Part 21. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 202. The surface of the body is almost all blue. This blue color is entirely caused by the attack of the metal monster. And among these azure colors, there are countless crack-like traces. Those cracks are places where there are no blue defenses. It seems that there is not enough azure substance in these places, so he can only rely on his body's defense to resist the enemy's attacks. The red light attack, Jia Yan's body clot defense and exoskeleton can be defended once or twice, but if too many red lights attack the same place at once, his defenses will soon weaken. As for the previous red light attacks, after dozens of attacks, those areas without blue defense directly became heavily damaged. A series of hideous wounds appeared on Jia Yan's body. There are even some inexplicable colored liquids flowing out from some places inside. The color of mosquito blood should obviously not be red, but at this time, blood was flowing out of his wounds. This was the first time Jia Yan saw his body bleeding, but there were too many strange places in his body, so he just looked at the red blood and stopped paying attention. He shook himself. He looked at the army of metal monsters on the other side, continuing along the main road towards Tan City. Because of his interception, the number of this army directly changed from more than 1,000 to only about 700. In other words, Jia Yan's battle directly caused the metal monster in the Great Battle of the Huaxia Kingdom a few days ago. Equal losses. Which army only caused about 300 losses to the metal monsters, and they themselves also lost thousands of people. After observing the metal monsters for a while, the giant mosquito's body tried hard to flap its wings again. Buzz buzz. The sound is no longer that violent, but has the feeling of the original flying sound of a small mosquito, feebly flying towards the sky. Jia Yan's figure was heading towards Tancheng. It was still outside the suburbs of Tancheng. Not for a minute or two. Jia Yan's body returned to the sky above Tan City. At this time, the army of metal monsters still had not arrived. He just wanted to take out the laptop bag he kept at home before they arrived. Although I plan to store my laptop bag on my rooftop. However, after seeing the huge lethality of blue-gray stones, his idea changed again. Such a powerful method. It's better to control it in your own hands. Besides, it is not known whether those metal monsters have the ability to detect blue-gray stones. After all, this thing was taken out of their bodies. A battle between a giant mosquito monster and a metal monster took place in an open field. Unfolds, and ends, except for a few human beings. No one else saw it at all. But besides these humans, there is another thing that has witnessed this unprecedented battle. This thing. It's a spy satellite hundreds of kilometers above the heads of both warring parties. The outcome of a great battle shocked all the concerned humans here. Because the amount of data that satellites can send is not large. It was just some intermittent picture patterns, so they didn't see the specific battle process. As for the blue-gray pebbles, it was impossible to see clearly. After all, with the resolution of the satellite, it is not easy to see those metal monsters on the ground. To see such small blue-gray pebbles that are excited at speeds above the speed of sound is just a dream. So when these people saw the metal monster and the giant mosquito monster, everyone was very surprised at the result and scene of the battle between the two. What level of battle can it turn into like this? It is simply an unimaginable scene. Forget about those metal monsters, they can fight the human army to this extent, and their strength is obvious to all. But why does that giant mosquito monster have such strength? When it was reported in the TV media before, I never heard that this kind of mosquito has such a strong ability, and the ones I saw before were simply some that used physical attacks. Giant mosquito, this giant mosquito can fight those metal monsters. Some of the huge explosions on the ground must be caused by him. So why can this giant mosquito, which is supposed to only have physical attacks, be able to cause such an attack? A series of questions made the researchers at these monitoring stations extremely surprised. The discovery of this matter completely changed their view of the giant mosquito monster. However, Jia Yan doesn't care about what these researchers think of him. If he knew that these people had just seen his actions, his only hope would be that they would not really launch any nuclear weapons here. In that case, he would be very powerful. It may be affected. However, Jia Yan didn't know that his every move was being monitored, so he was still retrieving his laptop bag at his own pace. On the rooftop at home, Jia Yan didn't waste much time. After taking out his laptop bag, he just took a brief look at the contents inside. After taking a few glances and realizing that nothing was missing, I stuffed the items back into the bag. Not long after, the big mosquito's body continued to soar directly from the small building. High in the air, Jia Yan's body was flying there. At this time, he finally saw the metal monsters. Each of these monsters looked at the giant mosquito monsters flying above their heads, but this time they did not attack rashly. This group of monsters seems to know that the flying creature above them is not easy to deal with at all. If you want to deal with him, you may have to wait for the opportunity in the future. At this time, the big mosquito was carrying a laptop bag. Thanks to the monitoring satellite, it had completely focused its sights on those metal monsters. Otherwise, Jia Yan's weird image would definitely make those monitoring personnel feeling weird. The big mosquito's body has been flying to 1,000 meters altitude. Now he wants to fly slowly and take a rest. Jia Yan was in the air, constantly thinking about the gains from this battle. Fighting against so many metal monsters has both advantages and disadvantages, that is, Jia Yan has a stronger grasp of his own strength and has gained a lot more practical experience. The bad thing is that 5 blue-gray pebbles were consumed, and these 5 were consumed. Although more than 1,000 metal monsters were eliminated and hundreds were eliminated, it was because Jia Yan took advantage of the terrain. As well as tactics and other reasons, this result was achieved. He finally understood how terrifying the metal monster was. But no matter how scary it was a thing of the past now. Jia Yan had forced them to stop marching in this direction, which was already a very remarkable achievement. Almost half an hour has passed since this battle. My parents and little sister shouldn't have gone far yet. Jia Yan looked at the scenery below. The branch road he had guided his parents and others to take just now was actually a road leading to another city. After bypassing that road, he could still return to the current main national highway. It will just take some detours. But it's better to take a detour than encounter this wave of metal monsters. Otherwise, the parents would definitely be killed or injured. Finally achieving his goal, Jia Yan felt a little happy in his heart. He was in a very good mood at this time. After all, it was a good thing to be able to save his family from disaster. But don't let your guard down next time. Since there are so many small metal monsters here, it is not impossible that other metal monsters will appear nearby. I must follow them quickly. Thinking of this, Jia Yan's tired body flew faster. A group of people are walking on the road, and these people are walking extremely fast. Some humans who had just arrived from the rear looked nervous. They told the fleeing army in front that there was an army of huge metal monsters behind them, fighting against the giant mosquito monster entrenched on the road. No matter who wins or loses in the battle, they will all be caught up and killed by the metal monsters that are chasing them. So hurry up. My name is Wu Rongbin, and you walking at the back of the team, a young boy spoke to a girl about his age. The girl was supporting her father. The middle-aged man's legs and feet were not fully healed yet. After a while of traveling, he was already a little overwhelmed. Fortunately, his daughter was there to support him. Although his strength was limited, he still gave in. He has a lot more strength. Therefore, their family of 3 could barely follow the team and did not fall behind. The girl saw the boy on her side chatting with her. Since they were all refugees, she replied. My name is Jialin. Hello. Compared to this big boy of the same age, Jialin has obviously experienced more things, so she looks down to earth. Well, hello. Are you from Tanchinj? My father and I are outsiders. This is not the first time we have experienced this. Don't worry, metal monsters have certain patterns in their actions. They won't keep chasing us to chase away so many survivors. Wu Rongbin showed a smile unique to a big boy. In fact, he didn't have any other thoughts. He just saw that this family seemed to be in need of help, so he came up to talk to them. After chatting for a few words, he finally asked under the encouraging gaze of his father, I see that the things you are carrying are very heavy. Let me help you carry a box. The one without valuables will do. This. The girl hesitated, but after seeing the approval expressions on her parents' faces, she finally handed over a backpack in her hand. The big boy also had a smile on his face when he lifted his backpack. After being rescued by a giant mosquito yesterday, he and his father made a decision to help other people as much as possible in the future. As a reward for God allowing them to survive, Jia Yan rescued their father and son. At this time, the Wu family and his son were helping Jia Yan's family. Doing good deeds will be rewarded, it's actually that simple. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Buletin Yu. Chapter 203. Some book friends have misunderstood that this book is about eunuchs. Buletin Yu is here to explain. When I talk about opening a new book, I naturally mean that the book Giant Mosquito will be updated at the same time. Buletin Yu will insist on not letting Giant Mosquito TJ. Please rest assured. If you really like this book, please come to Cheateon.com to subscribe. Thank you. Because after the two young people became familiar with each other, the adults on both sides also started talking. The Wu family and his son were rewarded. The two elders of the Jia family told them the geographical knowledge of the area and the roads they could take in the future. Just when these five people were helping each other, hoo ho ho, the crowd discovered that above their heads, the scar giant mosquito, with its blue body, seemed to have flown an infinite distance from the other side of the sky to the top of the team. It's a giant mosquito. He's badly injured. I just wanted to say that this big guy's actions seem to be helping us escape. Don't you think so? Someone suddenly suggested that this giant mosquito monster should be helping their group of people. As soon as this topic was brought up, there was an immediate silence. But then, this person's topic did not make others agree. Some were mocking, some were sarcastic, but none of them thought his words were a correct guess. However, the influence of this sentence stayed deeply, and similar thoughts will always stay in the hearts of these people. What Jia Yan actually wanted to help was not these humans, but his own family. However, after helping so many humans by the way, he didn't have any special ideas. After all, he just did it casually. Just as he was flying in the sky and saw the scenery below, the look of surprise in his compound eyes suddenly flashed. He was surprised that the father and son below who were rescued yesterday were actually acting together with his family. But since the two of them were also helping his family, he didn't have to worry about whether the other party wanted to do something bad. Hoo ho ho. Giant mosquitoes fly in the sky. After a round-trip inspection, directly over everyone's heads, along the road ahead, they first arrived at a mountainous forest area 10 kilometers away. Hoo ho ho. The body of the giant mosquito flew down in the mountain forest. His body was extremely violent and huge, and he had a ferocious aura that remained after a great battle. So this giant mosquito flew down. Suddenly the whole forest seemed to be quiet. It seemed that because of his arrival, the mountain forest could not bear his huge oppression and died. All living creatures ceased their clamor. Those noisy little bugs have no sound, the chirping birds have stopped singing, and the whole forest has become silent. Deadly silent. The big mosquito didn't consciously notice this small detail after his body lowered. He just crawled directly to the ground. After all, the battle just now was too fierce, and his body suffered many blows and injuries. It was very serious now, so he stopped for a while. "I just want to rest directly." He was lying on the ground. At this time, his body became even more blue. Not only was it the azure color during the battle, but the azure color kept emerging at this time, so he felt that he was weak and desperately wanted to take a rest. "It seems that this battle is my limit, so I need to be careful not to exceed this limit in the future." Jia Yan looked at his scarred body, and his tired body found a more comfortable way to lie down. He planned to rest for a while in this place closest to his family, and then get up again later to conduct an inspection. Not long after, he seemed to have fallen asleep. The big mosquito is really tired. The quietness of the forest at this time made his rest efficiency much greater. After disappearing for more than an hour, on the road outside the mountain forest, the fleeing team finally arrived nearby. One by one, they looked at the place where the big mosquito seemed to have landed. After seeing nothing, each of them said nothing and walked forward silently. At this time, the team seems to have some tacit understanding. After all, they walked together and experienced dangers along the way, so at this time, they will also treat the orphans, the elderly, the sick and the disabled well. So at this time, there are 1 or 2 more helpers around the Jia family. One of them is responsible for supporting Jia's father, Jia Sheng, and the other is helping to carry some luggage. But people's voices became quieter. At this time, everyone in the team was extremely exhausted, especially the parents who were holding their children. Not only did they have to expend effort to hold their children, but they also had to constantly comfort them. One by one, they walked forward silently. There is still a long road ahead for them. Some people want to go to the nearest international big city, Shanghai, where Jia Yan once stayed. Others are even more diverse. Some people go to other cities where they can get on the train and try their best to escape to places where metal monsters do not exist, such as new provinces where metal monsters have not been found yet, or other nearby countries. Anyway, these people are fed up with the intrusion of metal monsters. They choose various methods one by one to get to a safe place without metal monsters. In fact, it's not bad. This Fujian province has become so corrupt because there is a cave where metal monsters appear. But in fact, in most places in China, metal monsters are still the kind of thing on TV media, even if many people know it. The human army is fighting some monsters from the underground, but this sense of unreality still prevents many humans from recognizing reality clearly, and instead treats this matter as an unreal situation. After all, reality is not a movie. It is very difficult for people to accept the whole thing of human beings being attacked by an army of mysterious creatures at once. It is under this situation that most Chinese people do not know the true situation in the war zone. But those in the military are the ones who know the urgency of the situation, and only those who have left the war zone know how terrifying the metal monster is. But this situation will not continue like this. The existence of metal monsters will soon make the entire human race realize its horror. Jia Yan didn't know how long he slept during this inadvertent sleep. Anyway, he seemed to have slept for a long time inadvertently. That is, when Jia Yan was sleeping, the blue color on his body gradually faded, and the scars became faint and lost little by little. The recovery ability of the giant mosquito is definitely not limited. But obviously this recovery has reached a level that Jia Yan has never reached before. The azure color is fading away. The big mosquito's body is slowly returning to its original appearance. A deep and steady pitch black color was revealed on the surface of his body, and this display was not an ordinary display, but a manifestation that seemed to have strengthened his body after a series of battles. Originally, the big mosquito shouldn't be able to repair its body so easily. Although his body's recovery ability is indeed relatively strong, at this time. However, his recovery ability is still better than before. The reason for this situation is precisely after his last mutation. The effect of the azure liquid and azure crystals is still left in his body. If it weren't for them, Jia Yan wouldn't have recovered so quickly. However, it was also because of this consumption that his body's physique was improved again, and there was some remaining azure substance. He was released because of this, and Jia Yan only had to wait for his body to continue to recover. You can continue to get the complete mutation effect on your body, and you can put the next mutation on the agenda. Of course, things can't be all good. This injury is a permanent injury to Jia Yan, and this injury will stay with him for a long time. Even after another mutation, it is not certain whether the injury will be completely healed. Therefore, in this battle against the metal monster, Jia Yan lost 5 blue-gray pebbles, plus hidden dangers to his body in the future. The reward is the salvation of parents and family, the continued development of the blue substance remaining in the body, and the advancement of the next mutation time. Whether this is a cost-effective thing or not depends on the beholder. But for Jia Yan, even if there are no other gains, this move is meaningful. The lives of his family cannot be compared with other things. So now, he doesn't think about things like rewards at all. If he thought so much, he wouldn't make a move to save his family. A huge dark creature faintly regained its consciousness in this mountain forest. There was a faint sparkle in his eyes, and it was faintly visible that his body seemed to be bigger again. However, compared to the less obvious growth of his body, the changes in his exoskeleton are what is more surprising. The mosquito's exoskeleton has become somewhat smoother at this time. His own dark color and the condensation on the surface of the exoskeleton have changed in a more reasonable way. That is the surface of the exoskeleton. At this place, the condensation slowly retracts into the interior of the exoskeleton without understanding the principle, leaving only the complete exoskeleton body. Of course, the exoskeleton is not a pure exoskeleton, but mixed with some blue in the deep layers. The appearance of this blue color means that his exoskeleton finally has a permanent blue substance. The appearance of this substance, it will give the big mosquitoes a more powerful defense. Of course, the changes this time are not that big. After all, they are just digesting the residual effects of the last mutation. Although his strength has improved, it has not allowed Jia Yan to make huge progress like mutation. Soon, the big mosquito woke up from his sleep. But he was still in a groggy state. After half an hour passed, he finally came to his senses. How long has it been? I just took a short rest, why did I sleep until dark? Jia Yan tried to get up, but his heavy body made him shake. His body seemed to be a little uncomfortable. Although he wanted to stand up and rush to his parents, his body could no longer move at all, so he had to crawl down unsteadily. He felt weak. The next chapter is available immediately. Please subscribe. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 204. This volume is over, and the next volume will have a new plot and rhythm. In the next volume, the story is about to usher in the greatest plot development, so stay tuned. Please subscribe. It seems that my body has undergone some changes. This change cannot be called a mutation at all, but the mutation effect left over from this time is still further demonstrated. In addition, I lost too much physical strength today, so I will look weak. Jia Yan quickly deduced his current situation. But the inference was useless, the body still couldn't move. At this time, he had no choice but to give up the idea of continuing to chase his family and take a rest in this mountain forest first. In desperation, Jia Yan turned his attention to the laptop bag behind him. This little girl might have QQ on her phone. Jia Yan thought about it and took off the computer bag. His computer bag has been used repeatedly and looks dusty and old. However, this computer bag has helped Jia Yan a lot, and the computer in it has played a very good role, so Jia Yan still carries this computer everywhere. Run. At this time, he looked up. In fact, he knew that the mountain forest where he landed was near a small town, so this place should also have internet access. If we approach a place that was not affected by the war before, we won't even shut down the internet. Jia Yan has returned to China for so long, and this is the first time he has turned on the computer. As expected, the laptop was almost out of power. Although Jia Yan had cherished the use of power, it was obviously beyond Jia Yan's imagination to be without power for such a long time. But he still has backup power. Just after the external power supply was plugged in, the familiar sound of the laptop starting up sounded again. Jia Yan nodded with satisfaction, and then just waited for the computer screen to open. Later, Jia Yan discovered that his portable notebook was a bit too small for him now. Just a few seconds after he opened his laptop, Jia Yan controls the mouse with his front feet, but he is still not very comfortable, which makes him a little helpless. It's fine now, if it mutates again. He probably won't be able to use the laptop since the keyboard and mouse are both made for human use. It was lucky that he was able to use this giant mosquito for such a long time. But fortunately, it is still barely usable now. Jia Yan used the mouse with difficulty and clicked on the QQ icon on the computer little by little. This scene reminded him of when he was a little mosquito. But at that time, I was too small to operate the mouse. Now, my body is too big to operate the mouse. Things under the sun, it's amazing. QQ is still the QQ that Jia Yan applied for later, but this QQ did not add the girl's number. Fortunately, the girl's QQ number was actually used by Jia Yan before. Later, because the little girl fell in love with it, it was given to her because it was used by Jia Yan. So he still remembers that number. The appearance of QQ being completely logged in was displayed in front of the screen. Jia Yan was about to click on the dialog box to add friends. But before that, a strong prompt sound suddenly came from the laptop speaker. Beep beep beep. Jia Yan was slightly startled. There is only one friend on this QQ, and there is only one person who will send him messages, and that is the bearded one of the two killers. The bearded QQ avatar was that of a Korean oppa. Jia Yan took a closer look and saw that the avatar of the Korean oppa was flashing. What happened to these two people? Have they successfully escaped from Japan? Jia Yan clicked on the news with a little curiosity. In fact, he himself didn't know that because these two humans were the only people he could communicate with now. Every time he logged into QQ, he always looked forward to news from the two of them. After all, only by communicating with them would he be able to communicate with others. He temporarily forgot that he was a mosquito, but used a false senior identity to maintain contact with them. The message under QQ is indeed a message, but the content of this message is a bit too much. Senior, we have escaped successfully and are now back to China. This is the first news. But there was not much time behind this news, and there was another news rumor. Senior, there was a monster war in Japan. The big mosquito that is related to you seems to have appeared in that battle. Are you okay? This is the second news. The above two messages are both polite messages, which are in line with their habit of being more respectful to this so-called senior on QQ. But the next news made Jia Yan a little more focused. Senior, we in China have actually been attacked by metal monsters. We have accepted a very suspicious mission before. Now that we think about it, the matter of this metal monster has something to do with it. Now we have decided to investigate this matter. If you don't have time, please help me. This news is from a few days ago, but there is still more information to come. Senior, we have already investigated that suspicious mission, and there is indeed something weird in it. Although our country has never obtained the inside information about metal monsters before, there has definitely been relevant research on the so-called mysterious place in the underground world. Senior, I don't know if you are interested in this, but if so, we can show you the information we just obtained. The mystery of the underground world? Jia Yan was thinking slightly. This news was the last news from the two killers, and this news came more than 10 hours ago, when Jia Yan had returned to China. These two people were intentional and kept sending him messages. Perhaps after leaving their own organization, they regarded him as a reporting person. However, this news is still very useful. Jia Yan is still very interested in the so-called secret place of the underground world. Jia Yan thought for a while and sent them a reply first. I am very interested in your news. If possible, please send me a copy of the news. Thank you. Jia Yan didn't know whether the two were online now, so while waiting for the message, he went to Add Friends and clicked Add Friends, and then entered the little girl's QQ number because a verification message needed to be added. Jia Yan was just thinking about what to fill in. Suddenly, a QQ message notification interrupted his train of thought. The Korean oppa's profile picture flashed in the system tray in the lower right corner of the computer. It's those two killers. Jia Yan actually admires the survival ability of these two people. It seems that they have experienced a lot of dangers, but they have survived until now. I don't know if it's because the consciousness of survival is stronger than others. He simply stopped sending the verification code to his little sister's QQ, and clicked on the QQ message to take a look. This is a message that accompanies a message file. Jia Yan looked at the chat message first. Senior. You are finally online. We thought you had stopped contacting us. We have sent you the information you requested in a file. This is our analysis of the investigation and research on that mysterious place. In addition, we are here today. I heard that the Geo family, whom you, Senior, value very much, was in the city. At this time, they were attacked by metal monsters. We have found a way to come down the road to join them. Now the Geo family is under our protection. We told Geo family, we are that Jia Yan's friends in Shanghai. After all, the matter is urgent. I hope seniors don't blame us for doing this without your consent. When Jia Yan saw such a long list of news, he was slightly startled. These two people. He is already protecting his family. Them. To be honest, Jia Yan basically had a relationship with these two killers. Although they were indelibly helpful to Jia Yan's mutation and strength, Jia Yan always thought that it was just some coincidence and chance. Result. So much so that after he rescued these two people last time, he thought that the two parties had completely cut off their relationship. I even thought about quitting and not contacting him anymore. But this time, when the two killers heard that the Geo family that he, the senior, was concerned about had suffered a catastrophe, they directly and without any hesitation came to help again. Moreover, they have no idea what relationship Jia Yan, the senior, has with the Geo family. Just because the Geo family is a family that his senior cares about, they go to great lengths and even risk a little to do this. And Jia Yan knew that these two guys were seriously injured when they were in Japan, and they were definitely not going to recover at this time. Actually, under such circumstances, he came to help the Geo family. Jia Yan sighed deeply in his heart. It seems that the favor owed this time is really big. And it is estimated that this kind of affection cannot be described as friendship, but that these two people really treat him, a senior who they have never met, as one of their own, otherwise why would they be so interested? It seems that my parents and little sister are really under their protection. Don't rush to add me to QQ now. I will go out to verify it later. I hope they won't deceive me. Jia Yan, as a person, has experienced all kinds of sadness and hardship. The big mosquito that has just come this far, naturally wouldn't believe too much just because of the other party's words, so at this time he suppressed his concentration and sent a message. Where are you now? His message was simple. We are now at the municipal hospital in Chang City. The Geo family's elderly are tired from walking on the road. Let's ask them to do a checkup here. Jia Yan was even more moved by the bearded man's answer. but his eyes have not seen the real facts, and it is impossible for him to completely believe it. Let's take a rest and go to Chinchi. Jia Yan felt that his body was still a little weak. He could fly at this time, but he would definitely not be able to exert his combat effectiveness if he encountered an enemy, so he decided to take a rest. By the way, take a look at the so-called secret information the two killers gave him. Thinking of this, Jia Yan did not rush to reply to the other party, but opened the information file and browsed it. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 205. Chinchi, a county-level city only a few dozen kilometers away from Tanchinj. In this city, the situation is not much different from that in Tan City last night. Many refugees from Tan City and other cities gathered here again. The number of people is amazing. Many tents appeared in the open ground, causing big problems for traffic and security. However, no one paid attention to this problem at this time. After all, the nearby city Tanchinj was attacked by metal monsters, so the attack on Chinchi was probably very close. Those law enforcement officers are so busy themselves that they have no time to manage so much now. At this time, it is simply unimaginable to find a chance to see a doctor in Chinchi hospital. Even if you queue up honestly, you can wait in line for several days. There are too many people injured. But even in this situation, the Jia family still got a ward, or even a private ward. Many people thought that this ordinary-looking family was some extraordinary person. But only they know that they are not a big shot, they are just ordinary refugees from Tan City. Xiaolin, you go to the bank with your mother later, withdraw 20,000 yuan, and give it to those two friends. Although they say they are your brother's friends, I don't think so. No matter what their purpose is, first of all don't owe them too many favors. Jia Sheng, the head of the Jia family, was lying on the hospital bed, his face not very good looking. Next to him were his accompanying wife and daughter Jia Lin. After a long period of running away, this family finally came to the city. However, it was not all their own efforts that made them come here. On the way, they met the old man. Two mysterious figures who came to help Jia's family when they were attacked. These two people took great care of Jia Yan's family along the way, but when asked about the reason, these two people refused to say anything. Instead, they used the excuse that they were Jia Yan's friends. Helping this family. This is obviously an excuse. But neither party thought that this was actually the real situation. No one could have guessed that the big mosquito was actually the reborn son of the Jia family, Jia Yan. The unpredictable behavior of the two killers made Jia's father very uncomfortable. This middle-aged man has lived for most of his life. I have never seen such a person who just gives without expecting anything in return. And he saw these two people fight the last time they fought with those who broke his legs. These two men also took out guns. So he doesn't trust these two people very much. Are these two people friends of my son who only knows how to study biology? This is nonsense. So for these two people, Jia's father still didn't trust him very much, so he asked his daughter to go get the money. Although he also believed that in the hospital at this time, one could not stay in this ward with money. But he didn't want to owe those two people any favors. Not long after, Jia Mu and Jia Lin walked out of the ward. But when they walked out of the ward, they met the two men who went out to handle the hospital procedures for them. The two men were also obviously wounded, one had gauze on his arm. The other is inflexible legs. Hey, where are you going? It's very messy outside now. It's okay not to go out, the man with a beard asked a little strangely when he saw the two mothers and daughters walking out of the ward. I asked them to go out and do something. Father Jia's voice came out from the ward. When the young man wearing glasses heard the voice, he frowned slightly and said to the bearded man next to him, I'll go with them, you stay here to protect Uncle Jia. After saying that, the young man wearing glasses turned around and followed the Jia family's mother and daughter. The bearded man grinned and walked into the ward. The gunshot wound on one of his legs has not completely healed, and walking is a little difficult at this time, but this man is very strong, and there is no shaking even with such an injury. Sir, who are you? Our Jia Yan should have nothing to do with you. If you have any other purpose, you will be disappointed. My family has nothing to give you, so please let us go. Jia Shen was on the hospital bed with a vigilant expression. When these two people met their family on the road, Jia's father would be lying if he said he was not surprised at all. But when the other party's arrangements were so perfect and there was a hospital ward for their family, at that time, Jia Shen became a little wary. If a stranger is extremely passionate about you, there is only one explanation: the other person must have ulterior motives. Unexpectedly, the bearded man showed no expression after hearing these words. He still limped to the side of the hospital bed where Jia Shen was, and then sat down on the chair. He shook his head, took out an apple and peeled it, but still smiled and explained. Uncle Jia, don't think too much. We really have nothing to do with your family, Jia Yan, but we are entrusted by someone to take care of your family here, and we don't know who this person is, so just stop asking. Entrusted by someone? When Jia Shen heard the bearded man's words, he immediately looked at the other person's face with a bit of surprise. After seeing that the other person didn't have any special expression, he also thought about it doubtfully. Who is that person? He is obviously a noble person who can instigate two people like this. However, in Jia Shen's memory, his family is not related to any noble person. Just when the three Jia family members and the two killers continued to act like this, it seemed a little awkward, but they stayed together. In the forest not far away, a huge monster moved slightly in the forest. Click. Click. His body was a little stiff, but it was much better than before. In this mountain forest, Jia Yan finally read the information completely. In the big mosquito's heart, there was a look of astonishment like a turbulent wave. This information only has a very secret in it. This secret representative, although the Huaxia kingdom has no preparations for this metal monster attack, has already done some research on this weird incident. The two killers obtained this first-hand information when they murdered a hugely corrupt official. The corrupt official had no research capabilities, but firmly held the leadership position of a secret research base. And this official was looking at this information before he died. It is also because the information was written for him to read. So Jia Yan can also understand it. The so-called metal monsters have a unified research object name in this secret research base, and that is high alloy creatures. This information does not explain how they came up with this report. It also didn't say why there was information about metal monsters in the research base. But it's obvious that that secret research base must have obtained the body of one or more metal monsters. Then here comes the problem. When the Huaxia kingdom was in the original underground world, it seemed that they didn't know any secrets. So why do they still research the body of metal monsters? Jia Yan keenly observed that the time on this document was as early as a year ago. At that time, Huaxia had already obtained the body of a metal monster. No wonder Huaxia seemed to be in trouble in the past year or two. It was announced that several good scientific research results had been developed. But that's not what Jia Yan cares about. Is this scientific research institute likely to be of any benefit to me or allow me to gain anything? Jia Yan has become somewhat addicted to similar places. The previous factory had given him too many benefits, and now he immediately reacted to this idea. I still have to go and take a look when I have time. This place seems to be on the Qinghai Tibet side. The straight line distance is about 3,000 kilometers. However, with my speed, I can reach it very quickly. Jia Yan thought for a while and nodded. He stood up. He still can't let go of family matters. So at this moment, the wings flapped slightly and I felt my body. Jia Yan felt that he seemed to be getting better. The body that continued to change brought him a certain degree of recovery. Although it also caused him to be unable to move, this result was actually a good thing. After all, he became a little stronger, although this a little seemed to be just a little bit. Better than nothing, right? It didn't take long for him to move his whole body. A pair of compound eyes of the big mosquito flickered slightly. He looked at the dark night above his head, and it was night again. This time was his favorite time. After all, mosquitoes are nocturnal creatures, and he still prefers them at this time. Although the night does not seem to be a hindrance to those metal monsters, the impact on the human side is definitely greater, and now Jia Yan actually seems to have a relationship with the human side. Can't say enough how good it is. After all, he has killed so many humans, and he would not expect that his actions of blocking the road and saving so many people would be understood by humans. So at night, it was in line with his idea of traveling. When he felt that his body had finally recovered to a certain extent and should be able to fight to a certain extent, the giant mosquito tried to vibrate its wings without hesitation. Buzz buzz. The body of the giant mosquito slowly flew up from the mountain forest. The dark and huge body gradually rose in the air. At night, the temperature has dropped a bit, but the temperature at this time still has little impact on me. I just don't know if the temperature in Qinghai Tibet is too low for me to bear. When Jia Yan was in the air, his body paused slightly for a second. Tens of meters in the air, he looked at the moon above his head. After being a mosquito for so long, one of the special skills that Jia Yan may have developed is to tell the direction by looking at the celestial phenomena. Not long after, the big mosquito finally figured out the direction. The huge body turned around in the air. Slowly flew towards Chang City. The big mosquito's body is not happy. After all, the injury is not completely healed. At this time, his combat effectiveness has been reduced by at least half, so it is better not to fly so hard. For those two killers, inexplicable, Jia Yan has a little trust. Since they said they were protecting their families, there should be nothing wrong. With their protection, as long as they don't encounter metal monsters, ordinary crises shouldn't be a problem for them. Under the bright moonlight, a huge flying monster's body shines in the light. His body, which seemed to hide violent power, disappeared into the clouds little by little, and gradually flew into the distance. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 206. A new volume with new atmosphere, please subscribe. Chinchi, this city may have never been so lively. Countless people gathered in every corner of the city. Some people escaped from Tanchinj, some came from other cities, and even more were humans who had wandered in countless cities, attacked by metal monsters, and escaped all the way. Those people are already complete refugees. For a little food and a little money, you have to put yourself to the test. It was in this place that a girl who had just walked out of the bank was naturally targeted immediately. She met up with her mother who was standing on the roadside, and the two of them walked forward furtively in the night, as if they were afraid that others would not know that they had taken a huge sum of money. Just when they had not gone far, the two men who had been watching at the bank entrance for a long time had a fierce and strange smile on their faces, and then they were about to follow him. But before that, they only felt that the collar on their back was suddenly grasped by a strong hand. The owner of this big hand grabbed one with one hand and pulled the two directly. "I'm sorry, this is my sister, can you please stop doing it?" The owner of the big hand held the two of them and spoke calmly behind them. The two men felt like they were being pulled by an irresistible force. At this moment, they suddenly looked at each other. One person suddenly took out a sharp knife from his arms and stabbed him in the back. The other person suddenly backhanded him and grabbed the man's arm, trying to control him for a moment, but at least he couldn't avoid his partner's sharp knife. But at this moment, the man behind him suddenly moved. He turned directly in the direction of the sharp knife and narrowly avoided the blade's cut. The next moment, his eyes lit up. The arm holding the sharp knife was grabbed directly by him. Then he exerted force with his palm. Click. With a crisp sound, the man's wrist was suddenly dislocated by him. Another man grabbed the wrist of the person behind him, and this man held it behind his back. Then he grinned. This person bumped into the man. After a loud bang, the man holding him squatted on the ground, covering his forehead. Two brothers. This matter is your fault. I didn't do anything cruel. I hope you will just stop it. The man behind them is now. Only then did he finally reveal his entire figure to their eyes. This is a man with a beard, and his face is very rough. To put it bluntly, it feels a bit gross. However, his strength was also proportional to his size, and he instantly made two strong men lose the ability to resist. Not something ordinary people can do. The expressions of the two men changed, and now they were very tough. Dislocated wrists and blows to the head without saying a word. They were about to make a move when a smoking man standing with several people on the side of the road suddenly spoke. You want to be killed by him? Just keep doing it, the man said calmly. The two were stunned for a moment, then looked at the man. The bearded man also frowned slightly and looked at the smoking man who spoke. This man was in a dark place, puffing on the cigarette in his mouth. The light around him suddenly brightened, and then dimmed. His face, which was slightly exposed, fell into darkness again. But soon, he raised his head. This man's face, which contained a sense of vicissitudes of life, looked very ferocious under the light. Brother, you are a dragon crossing the river, so don't bully little gangsters like us who have lost their families and lives. If you give us a way to survive, we will also give you a road to the sky. Don't be aggressive. After the man finished speaking, behind him, 7 or 8 young men holding steel pipes and other weapons stared at the bearded men with unfriendly expressions. The beards that controlled the two men were startled. Then, he smiled slightly. He casually released the two men who were controlling him. He looked disdainfully at the gangsters over there, and the bearded man shook his wrinkled clothes. After his clothes became straight, he looked at the smoking man who was talking. You are very discerning, so I won't argue with you. See you later. After saying that, the bearded body limped and slowly disappeared into the night. The two injured men walked up to the man with wary expressions on their faces. Who are you and why are you stopping us from resisting? One of them asked. The smoking man finally let go of his pretense. He threw away the cigarette in his hand, and you could see that his body was actually trembling a little. When this man heard these two men talking like this, he immediately started yelling. You two bastards! Do you know that you almost killed us? I have been a soldier for 7 or 8 years, and I have never seen anyone with such murderous intent. If you get involved with him, why don't you put it here? We are all going to die together. To tell you the truth, don't look at that person's injury. Just to deal with us like this is just like having fun. This. The man with the beard whose arm was twisted off suddenly looked incredulous. He could tell that the bearded man might be very powerful, but if he was so powerful, he really didn't believe it. But if you don't believe it anymore, it's impossible to catch up with them now that they've left. Then you're really asking for trouble. Not to mention what happened to the few gangsters here. Jia Mu and Jia Lin walked towards the road after receiving the money. They did not notice the changes behind them at all. The bearded man was limping, slowly following behind the two of them. There were no other accidents along the way. The three of them entered the hospital gate one after another. In fact, Jia Lin and her husband did not expect that banks would be open at night. However, this matter is actually a way for Huaxia to deal with unexpected situations. It allows people to withdraw money, so that it will not cause too many social problems. Question. The Jia family will definitely have trouble with the two killers because of this money matter. It's impossible for those two people to ask for the Jia family's money anyway. Even if they don't look at the face of the mysterious senior, to put it bluntly, they still don't like such a small amount of money. They are killers, and any international mission is worth 6 or 7 figures. The Geo family's money may seem like a lot to the Geo family, but to them, it really means nothing. So they are destined not to want this little money. And just when the two sides were likely to continue arguing, a huge flying creature pierced the sky and flew quickly towards the city. His body made many disguises in the air. Then I found the right route. The giant mosquito flies more than 2,000 meters high in the sky. This height can already be regarded as the regular flying height of giant mosquitoes. The temperature here is not too low, which is completely bearable for large mosquitoes, and if it is so high, it is easy to find the city below. After all, at 3,000 meters, the range that can be seen is huge. The reason why he flew by mistake before was because Jia Yan saw the light of another city. When he flew there, he realized that it was not the Chinchi he was going to, so he continued flying. Not long after, the big mosquito flew over Chinchi. It should be right this time. The road sign also says Chang City. Jia Yan descended slightly, and then, under the surprised screams and sounds of surprise from countless people below, he kept looking for the location of the Chinchi Municipal Hospital. The current body of the big mosquito, he is not going to hide anymore. After all, that is what he did when he was in Tanchinj. Now that he is in Chinchi, there is no need to say anything and continue to hide. After all, this nearby area is now entirely within the sphere of influence of metal monsters, and there is no trace of human troops here at all. So he can continue to search for the location of the municipal hospital with peace of mind. Soon, the hospital's unique and spacious building was found by giant mosquitoes. Very good, fly over now and look from room to room to see if there is any trace of family members. Jia Yan's compound eyes were slightly bright. But before that, Jia Yan hid the laptop bag he was carrying. If the two killers saw it, they might guess that he was the so-called senior. Although Jia Yan doesn't care about being known, he is a mosquito that can use a computer or something, but of course it's best if no one knows the secret. Catch up before 12 o'clock. 2 more updates. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 207. In the dark night sky, a huge and imposing shadow flew slowly in it. Jia Yan's body flew slowly. Ah! Suddenly, a sharp voice sounded from underneath him. It was a little nurse, but after the little nurse screamed, she quickly covered her mouth, obviously worried that she would attract the flying giant mosquito monster. As a new type of monster, giant mosquitoes not only attracted widespread attention in the news and newspapers during the initial period, but also were often mentioned when metal monsters fought against humans. Every time an expert goes on TV to introduce those metal monsters, they will show pictures of giant mosquitoes. After all, monsters that appear together definitely need to be explained together. Therefore, although Jia Yan, this huge mosquito, does not think he is very famous, in fact, as those metal monsters capture human cities again and again, his popularity has become very large, and he can basically, it is said that everyone in China will know him. So when the little nurse saw the giant mosquito, she was startled at first, but after realizing that it was just a giant mosquito with terrifying fighting power, she quickly controlled her shouting, for fear of attracting the giant mosquito and then attacking her. Jia Yan's compound eyes flashed faintly. He looked at the little nurse below. She was on the same road, holding medical equipment in her hand. She was obviously very busy. After Jia Yan looked at it, he stopped paying attention to the other party and just flew up, slowly flying forward in the air. His body did not try his best to hide it. After all, it is not very feasible to hide his figure in such a low place. So the big mosquito is still flying slowly. Many humans on the ground discovered his body, and figures shouting or running away in panic appeared in this hospital. There was a sudden uproar in this hospital. Jia Yan is still flying. The scene was very strange. Many people in Nyo University Hospital looked at the giant mosquito monster that was slowly approaching. Some patients who heard the news opened their windows, and then saw the huge animal flapping its wings and flying downwards. No one has actually seen a giant mosquito. I can't understand the overwhelming feeling. Although Jia Yan's current body is still a monster with a body length of only more than 2 meters, his wings have a wingspan of more than 4 meters, and his 6 long legs can directly cover a range of more than 10 meters. This level of oppression. People who haven't seen it with their own eyes can't understand it. Moreover, the giant mosquito monster race used his several actual battles to tell humans that among the monster types that appeared this time, not only the metal monsters that are extremely harmful to humans have extremely strong actual combat capabilities, this giant mosquito monster is even more powerful than metal monsters. Monsters, scary monsters. Look at their record. When he first appeared in China, he took a bullet and saved a little human girl. While staying in the bay, a fighter plane was directly damaged. The Japanese country is even more exaggerated. This guy from the giant mosquito monster race killed self-defense force soldiers and damaged an armored vehicle. Afterwards, he fought with several fighter planes, resulting in the destruction of 2 of them. Some people who fled before even said that the giant mosquito monster in front of them was much more powerful than his predecessors who had been exposed. He was directly in the middle of the road, provoking a metal monster army of more than 1,000 sizes. That's a metal monster with over 1,000 words. The combat effectiveness of these metal monsters is beyond human imagination. The combat effectiveness of an army of more than 1,000 metal monsters is stronger than the combat effectiveness of a human army of 10,000 people. But the giant mosquito monster in front of me. In the same battle in the wild, he had an extremely terrifying and brutal battle with the metal monster. No one knows how this monster did this. They only know that he really relied on the number of monsters. More than 1,000 metal monsters were completely suppressed. There were even people who escaped to this Chang city after a narrow escape and saw the scene after the war. The scene was so unbelievable, that intersection. There are countless metal monster corpses, one monster after another, all of them are completely dead. And all of that was caused by the giant mosquito monster in front of us. Jia Yan flew forward slightly. In fact, he was a little depressed about his battle on the road. That was to kill so many metal monsters. There should have been a lot of blue-gray pebbles, but at that time, there were more metal monsters entrenched on the ground. They couldn't give Jia Yan time to go down and pick up the blue-gray pebbles. So Jia Yan simply couldn't get the many blue-gray stones there. When he flew out of Tan City and went to explore with a glimmer of hope, he found that all the small blue-gray stones there had been taken away. Of course, the people who took them away were obviously those metal monsters. I believe that with their wisdom, they won't even know how to do this. So it's a pity. After thinking about this, Jia Yan didn't have any other thoughts other than a slight pity. After all, he had always been at a disadvantage in this battle. If it weren't for the strong defense and the blue-gray pebbles, he might have died long ago. So don't be too wild at this time, find your family as soon as possible, and if those 2 killers are really people worthy of being entrusted, then. He went to the Secret Research Institute in Qinghai, Tibet to have a look. Now that the remaining Azure mutation effects have been absorbed, Jia Yan's pursuit of powerful mutations is ready to take action again. He wants another chance to mutate. For this mutation, you can rely on the blue-gray pebbles of the metal monster, but if there are other options, it will naturally be better. After all, although the blue-gray pebbles can make Jia Yan feel attracted, the feeling is too weak. So Jia Yan wants to do his best not to miss the opportunity of that Secret Research Institute. Even if there is no gain, it is still an opportunity, right? While the big mosquito was flying and thinking, the two people in the hospital were talking about something. These two people are a young man with a beard and a young man wearing glasses. Xiao Yao, the big mosquito they are talking about is something related to Senior Zhongwen. Others don't understand, but we know that Senior is related to the giant mosquito race. If we know this before next, think about it, when the Geo family was taking action, the giant mosquito began to appear in people's eyes. When the army of metal monsters was about to attack Tan City, the giant mosquito was blocking the intersection, obviously not wanting to let humanity pass. Other people just regard this giant mosquito monster as a creature without intelligence, so they don't think that he is actually protecting humans by doing this. But we know that he is probably intelligent, so a series of things happened. Can you also discover that the ultimate purpose of this giant mosquito is actually to protect the Geo family? There was a strange light in the bearded eyes. Thinking that the mysterious Senior Zhongwen was actually related to the mysterious creature giant mosquito race that the whole world was talking about, he felt an extremely excited desire to explore. However, the young man wearing glasses had a strange expression at this time. After a while, he nodded and said solemnly, "I just went to ask, there are really people in this hospital who witnessed that battle, but I don't want to know this. Think about it, the whole world is picketing that person the origins of giant mosquito monsters and other creatures, but at this time there is no definite guess. If we know this secret, do you think, as the Senior Zhongwen, a being who may leak the secret, it is better to let them live like this? Or killing is the best way to keep it secret?" The gentle voice of the young man wearing glasses made the bearded expression freeze. However, he also retorted very quickly, "Senior Chongwen saved us once last time. He will never do this. Even if we know his secret, it doesn't matter to him if we want to know the secret. Do you think we can't even know his secret? We have never met each other. Even if this secret is revealed, will it have any impact on Senior Chongwen?" This time it was the young man wearing glasses' turn to be a little dazed. This is how the two of them got along. At first glance, the young man wearing glasses seemed to be smarter, but when it was Gigi's turn, the beard was really not necessarily any weaker than young people wearing glasses. The two of them had long since gotten rid of the Geo family's desire to give them money, so they were discussing future matters in an uninhabited corner of the hospital. They were deciding whether to take the Geo family to a big city or to a secret stronghold in the wild mountains. After all, no one can guarantee whether the metal monsters will attack those big cities in the future, so correct judgment must be made at this time. In fact, it was a sudden thought that these two people would come to help the Geo family. After all, Senior Chongwen saved their lives before, so they have been thinking about how to repay them. But the attack of the metal monster happened to hit the city where the two of them were temporarily staying, so the two of them escaped with the crowd. However, just when they were considering whether to go to another hidden location, the bearded man suddenly thought of the Geo family. It just so happened that Tan City was about to be exposed. As a result, the two of them searched all the way, and they actually found traces of the Geo family. The above is the reason why these two people met by chance and helped Jia Yan a big favor again. Regardless of whether he did it intentionally or not, it did a great favor to Jia Yan. The several times of help can be said to reflect the two people's great concern for Jia Yan, the virtual Chongwen Sr. Just as the two continued to discuss the next journey, a scream suddenly reached their ears. The giant mosquito monster is coming. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 208. This sound immediately made both of them startled, and then they looked at each other. Immediately afterwards, the two of them rushed to the window without saying anything else. In that place, a dark flying creature with slowly flapping wings was looking at the people inside along the ward windows. And just when the two killers came out to watch, the giant mosquito's pair of huge compound eyes the size of a human head happened to look over. He just happened to look into the eyes of two killers. The indescribable momentum enveloped the two killers. The bearded man who looked extremely powerful in front of a few gangsters just now barely dared to move his eyes. The distance between the giant mosquito and them was only about 3 or 4 meters. This distance can be said to be extremely close. At this moment, the bearded man didn't know how to turn his head, and suddenly a sentence came out of his mouth. The Geo family is in the rightmost ward on the 4th floor. After saying this, the beards themselves felt a little incredible. Even if their guess was correct, this giant mosquito really had something to do with Senior Chongwen, but Senior Chongwen must have a special way of communicating with it. No matter how you think about it, this method should not be direct verbal communication. He actually talked directly to the giant mosquito. What if this behavior arouses the other person's disgust and directly attacks you? The bearded two knew that the giant mosquito monster's attack power could easily break through the walls of a house. Even if they stood in the hospital, they would not be safe at all. What's more, the giant mosquito monster can fight 1,000 metal monsters. 1,000 metal monsters can destroy this hospital several times. It is probably possible that a giant mosquito monster with considerable combat power could easily destroy this hospital building. The beard is so heart-wrenching. The young man wearing glasses looked at his occasionally confused companion and thought to himself, "You got me killed this time." But what is unbelievable is that when these two people are ready to be attacked by the giant mosquito monster, they will give each other pain even if they die. All they saw was the huge and terrifying mosquito flapping its wings opposite them. He actually nodded to the two of them in a very humane manner. A real nod. The very obvious nodding action made the two killers stunned for a moment. Does the giant mosquito of emotions really understand human language? And it's in Chinese. They don't know how to speak anymore. I hope this guess is true. I don't want this guess to be true. But at this moment, the giant mosquito monster seemed to be trying to verify the authenticity of their ideas. After looking up at the 4th floor of the hospital above, its wings were slightly stronger. Jia Yan's body began to fly upward. This. The bearded face was full of disbelief. The giant mosquito monster is actually able to communicate. And he was using human language, and he could actually understand it. This matter could be on the headlines of all the news tomorrow. These series of monsters, all humans have a premise, that is, these monsters are unable to communicate with each other, but now this giant mosquito has actually communicated with them. The bearded man looked up at the flying giant mosquito, and saw that it had indeed stopped on the 4th floor of the hospital building. His body was outside the windows of the wards, looking inward. The wards in this hospital usually have no curtains, so Jia Yan can easily see the people inside. Jia Yan looked through the windows one by one. And that's it? The bespectacled young man among the two killers downstairs was suddenly startled, and then he ignored his companion and rushed towards the stairs. All that was left was the confused beard. The Geo family were all in the ward, and they were discussing the topic of the two killers. The family was obviously somewhat divided. Jia Mu and Jia Lin were relatively relieved that they had helped the two killers several times, and they were willing to follow these two men in the future. But Jia's father Jia Sheng's intention was very firm. He didn't agree to go to the so-called safe place with these two people because they were too weird. Not only that, Jia Sheng also thought that if he was separated from two people in the city, it would be impossible for the two of them to keep staring at the whole family. As long as you find an opportunity, you can always escape from the sight of these two people. While the family was discussing, the ward door was suddenly opened. The people who came in shocked the Geo family. This person was clearly one of the two killers they were chatting with, the young man wearing glasses. As soon as the young man looked at the window of the ward, he rushed over without any time to explain. The Geo family looked like they didn't know what was going on. Looking at this man, I don't understand why he suddenly lost his temper. But when this man opened the curtains of the ward with one hand, a pair of huge compound eyes, as big as a human head, appeared outside this window. Everyone was shocked. Yeah, Jialin was so frightened that she jumped down from the hospital bed where she was sitting and hit the wall. She was obviously very frightened. Mother Jia's face turned pale all of a sudden, and the teacup she was holding fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Jia Sheng's expression changed. If he wasn't lying on the hospital bed, his reaction would probably be similar to his daughter's. Jia Yan's compound eyes were outside the window, looking at the family who was frightened by him. At this time, the whole family was in the ward. Jia's father did not seem to be in any serious condition, and Jia's mother did not appear to be ill. As for my sister Jialin, her movements are so large, it is probably even more unlikely that something will happen. It seems that these two killers really just asked their family members to come over to see if there are any hidden diseases. Seeing that his family was fine, Jia Yan finally felt relieved. The body of the big mosquito was still flying slowly in the outside world. The faces of the Jia family members in the ward suddenly changed when they saw this big mosquito monster again. However, the one whose expression became more serious was undoubtedly Jia Yan's sister Jialin. This little girl seemed to have finally revealed the doubts she had been having today. It seemed very familiar, and there seemed to be a faint emotion. This was the inexplicable feeling she had towards the big mosquito in front of her. Under the watchful eyes of her parents, she slowly walked towards the window, even though she had been frightened and screamed before. But now he walked towards the big mosquito without fear. Xiaolin, Mother Jia yelled over there. Although she seemed to have a vague feeling about this big mosquito, how could she let her daughter do something stupid at this time? But until then, Jialin had already walked to the window. She was only a few dozen centimeters away from the mosquito's slender mouthparts. The blood-sucking mouthparts were so close, but Jialin couldn't feel any danger. Instead, she was fighting against the giant mosquito monster right in front of her. Look at each other silently. Huge compound eyes looked at Jia Yan. Jia Yan was also a little surprised. This sister, who had been afraid of bugs since she was a child, actually walked up to him and looked at him. He suddenly remembered that a few months ago, when he was still a little mosquito, his sister Jialin was seeking revenge for herself in Shanghai. At that time, he had looked at each other like this. But at that time, he was just a little mosquito. But now it has reached a huge body that is impossible for ordinary creatures to grow. Does my little sister actually recognize me? Jia Yan suddenly felt that it was incredible that blood was real. Is it you? Jialin stretched out one finger. Her fingers were trembling a little, but she still stretched them out without hesitation. Jia Yan flew outside the window, his compound eyes twinkling slightly. He didn't back away or do anything to scare the little girl. Just like that, during the flight, a small white hand gently touched his slender mouth parts. Just like when I was little, my little sister always used her white and tender chubby hands. Gently grabbing his arm, the two brothers and sisters went to the rooftop of their small building to look at the moon. Fighting. Jia Yan's body actually trembled a little. The warmth of family, what a long memory. He has worked so hard and faced so many life and death crises, but with this touch, he can die. Xiaolin. Just as Jialin stretched out her hands. When he wanted to continue stroking the big mosquito, a palm stretched out. Pull Jialin back. This is Jia Yan's mother. As a responsible mother, this is indeed the most correct thing to do at this time. Compared to my more innocent sister Jialin, this is a normal reaction. Should I say that the younger sister is less defensive, or should I say that she is more at ease with the feeling in her heart? A monster like a giant mosquito dared to touch it at will. If it were a tiger, it would be touching the tiger's tail, which is simply unimaginable. But what Jialin did was not wrong. At least Jia Yan would never hurt his family because of it. On the contrary, it should be said that with the encouragement from his little sister this time, he has more motivation to move forward. Mother Jia pulled her younger sister Jialin back to the corner of the ward. They did not notice that the body of the big mosquito was getting further and further away in the dark night. Later, when Mother Geo was still criticizing her younger sister Geolin, they suddenly discovered that the mosquito monster outside the window had gradually disappeared in the night. Geolin broke away from her mother's arm and ran to the window. She seemed to see a strong sense of loneliness when she looked at the big mosquito just now. This kind of loneliness is very pitiful. It seems that Geolin feels the same way. The girl looked above her head, her figure gradually rising, gradually rising. The speed is getting faster and faster. Finally, the giant mosquito's violent flapping of wings suddenly made a bang sound, breaking through a certain limit. Whistle, roar, roar. The huge sound spread throughout the city below, frightening countless people beyond measure. It seems that the big mosquito with the affectionate look in his eyes suddenly changed, hiding his feelings deeply in his heart, and once again transformed into the powerful and invincible giant mosquito monster. Whistle, roar, roar. Bang bang bang. The body of the giant mosquito that broke through the speed of sound was the arrogant blue dragon roaring at the moonlit night, soaring into the sky. It's as if the whole world knows his pride. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 209. This is an invincible monster. But just below this arrogant body, in that hospital ward, looking at the roaring shadow of this powerful creature, the little girl Geolin felt unspeakable pain in her heart. It seemed that she understood what a weak heart was hidden under this violent and powerful voice. Under the gaze of countless people, the violent sound of the giant mosquito gradually faded away. What people didn't know was that the direction that this big mosquito was going was the direction that an army of metal monsters happened to be coming from. These metal monsters are attacking Chinchi one by one. During the flight, Jia Yan took out the notebook bag hidden in a shaded area. For the sake of his family, he would not hesitate to use a few blue-gray pebbles. Not long after, he hid the notebook again, but grabbed some blue-gray pebbles with his dark body, and flew towards the direction of the metal monsters that attacked Chinchi. Boom boom boom. After that, there was a lot of loud noise in that place. Another battle between giant mosquitoes begins. He said that creating a safe environment for his family is not just a matter of words. Not long after, a huge flying creature flew lightly from the fighting flames. There were more injured parts of his body. But the light in this creature's eyes is still so intense. Without any further pause, the giant mosquito's body continued to fly away into the distance. At this time, the big mosquito is even more tired, but he still can't rest now, and he needs to be more careful about the next thing. After all, the entire Fujian province is already full of metal monsters. The tentacles are touching. But we can't rest now. We need to at least get through today. The family will leave on the train soon. This time is the most critical. Jia Yan is still trying to hold on. This city is now under his protection. Chang City is among the nearest cities. The only city where trains are still running, other cities have either been wiped out, or the train lines cannot guarantee safety and have been stopped long ago. Chinchi is the last city still running trains. This is also the reason why more and more humans gather in Chang City now. In fact, some of the metal monsters have already taken a liking to the city. However, they were unable to attack and enter the city because the outer areas were already occupied by Jia Yan alone. Completely blocked. What frightened everyone in the city was that this night there were constant loud explosions, and this sound was definitely not caused by the destruction of ordinary metal monsters. This sound must be caused by the metal monster fighting something that would cause such a huge explosion. But they probably never dreamed that this was the giant mosquito monster. With the sound of fighting the metal monsters, this giant mosquito monster not only saved his own family, but also saved countless ordinary people. Of course, this rescue was not intentional. For other human beings, he is not in such a big mood to rescue or anything. Everything is just like what Jia Yan himself thought before, whether to save or not, it all depends on his own mood. If he saves the other person, he is lucky, otherwise it's not his fault to save him. After all, humans have no obligation to save anyone. He, a monster who has been reborn as a giant mosquito, has no such obligation. He was just doing this to help his family. The sounds of explosions and fighting continued until early in the morning, and then stopped a little. Finally, the much anticipated train arrived belatedly. Woo! Bang cut, bang cut. The huge roar of the train was extremely ear-piercing in the early morning. This car obviously didn't expect that this Chang city, which used to not have many people, would have such a terrifying passenger flow today, and these customers would have to get on the car no matter what. However, after consulting his superiors, the conductor of this train finally released the temporary admission of passengers. It wasn't until he couldn't hold it anymore that he closed the car door with the help of the policemen armed with guns. The situation was so special that for the following journey, the train was actually notified that it did not need to continue. This was the first time I had ever encountered this. After learning about the situation in detail, the train conductor also had a look of fear and cold sweat on his face. The leader above just spoke. The next journey may already be in the area controlled by the metal monster. The possibility of his train encountering danger as it continues to move forward is greatly increased, so he decided not to continue the train. Unexpectedly, in just one night, the war would deteriorate to this extent. Every staff member on the train was very frightened. It seemed that the next journey was like a dragon's pond and a tiger's den. Fortunately, they were not allowed to continue riding, otherwise, this train would definitely be very dangerous. So after a short period of rest, the train started moving towards the rear and was about to drive back. The Geo family is on this train. A huge mosquito was not far away from the train, constantly circling. The violent figure attracted tourists who were not in Chinchi. Everyone is very frightened. However, someone in the car from Chinchi explained that these people accepted it in a somewhat confused state. This giant mosquito monster was actually a good monster that helped humans kill metal monsters. This kind of thing is relatively weird and fantasy, but for humans at this time, because they have accepted so many things, it is relatively easy to accept such a seemingly good monster. The train starts. The giant mosquito monster is watching the train start. Jia Yan knew that his father was not willing to follow the two killers, but he could not resist the requests of his mother and younger sister, so he had to agree. In this way, the family can quickly get out of this warring province. Although other provinces are not free from the intrusion of metal monsters, there are still many cities where they can live a good life for a period of time. With the help of two killers, Jia Yan will be able to follow his own ideas and go to Qinghai Tibet to see if the so-called research institute really exists. The train started, and on the train at this time, the Najia family were also looking at the large mosquitoes flying and circling above their heads. This mosquito monster behaved very strangely in their ward last night, as if he really seemed to have wisdom and knew their family. However, not many people have seen this matter, and the Geo family is not prepared to tell it. What can and cannot be said, the Geo family still understands. Finally, the train kept moving, and the big mosquito flew behind the train. A monster that does not attack humans, this monster is quite popular. Of course, whether this popularity is because he can help deal with those metal monsters, or because he really likes it, that is not necessarily the case. Buzz buzz. The giant mosquito danced wildly and chased the train in the sky. His speed was definitely faster than the train. Since it is a temporary return flight, passengers who want to get off the train must be let off during the train journey. However, there are very few people who are willing to get off the train at this time. So after driving for less than a few hours, Jia Yan found that the scenery around him had changed a little. The cities below are already cities where some residents live relatively normal lives. These people are not threatened by metal monsters, and they don't think that the metal monsters are still in Fujian province today and will arrive at them tomorrow, so they still look relatively relaxed now. But what they don't know is that the entire Fujian province at this time is plunged into chaos and bloodshed. According to the attack speed of the metal monster, this place close to Fujian province is actually not very safe anymore. However, human beings always fail to notice the immediate danger, so at this time, even if someone comes to them and asks them to quickly pack up their belongings and escape, no one will believe it. So there's nothing to say, except maybe they'll wake up when the metal monster comes. At this time, the stable world is no longer the same as before. However, compared to those metal monsters, the giant mosquito monster that followed the train along a bumpy road, then crossed a province, and finally almost entered the important city of Shanghai in central China, actually caused a lot of noise. No one knew what this big mosquito meant. Even when they couldn't figure out the other party's intentions, the army also took action. A team of several thousand soldiers stood ready at an important road intersection away from Shanghai. It is said that the giant mosquito monster followed a train all the way to Shiyuan. Although it did not show any malice along the way, at this time, no one dared to place bets on this giant mosquito monster. On the premise that mosquitoes have no malicious intentions, humans have dispatched a powerful army. As long as something goes wrong, they will attack the giant mosquito monster. Although the giant mosquito seemed to have fought an evenly matched battle with many metal monsters in Mindi province in southern China, there were too many suspicious things in that battle, so at this time, the human side was still many people don't believe that the giant mosquito monster is so powerful. Anyway, human beings have been forced to a dead end by the metal monster at this time. They are even considering whether to use nuclear weapons as the ultimate method. So this giant mosquito monster has a different position from humans. So it is only natural for them to deal with this giant mosquito monster now. The train was moving slowly. The passengers on this train were diverted through the stations along the way. It was no longer so crowded. After all, people didn't really believe that the metal monsters could break through Fujian province and several other war zones so quickly. Entering other provinces, so they got off at places where they had relatives or family members along the way. There is another chapter coming soon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito author, Buletin U. Chapter 210. The big mosquito above the head was accepted by the people on the train after nearly a day of tracking. After all, with such a big mosquito as a bodyguard, there would definitely be no worries about being attacked by metal monsters. Moreover, the international metropolis Shanghai that is getting closer and closer makes these tourists feel relaxed. No matter how fast the metal monsters attack, they won't attack all at once when they arrive in this big city. You must know that this is an important city for mankind, and the guards are absolutely extremely powerful. Compared with the humans in the towns that the train passed through, most people on this train had seen the metal monsters wreaking havoc with their own eyes, so they actually didn't have much expectations for the combat effectiveness of the human army. They just didn't care. No matter how hard it is to defeat, in such a big city, you can't be so helpless. The Geo family in the car finally accepted the two killers' statement that they were in a secret residence in Shanghai. Originally, the two wanted to take the Geo family to a relatively rural place, but it was said that they also appeared in that place. They saw the metal monster, so they decisively changed their route and went to the secret residence in Shanghai. In fact, it was the inconspicuous building where Jia Yan saw the two of them living last time. But Jia Yan is destined to not be able to return to his old place this time. When the train arrived, it was still more than 30 kilometers away from Shanghai. A fighter jet with a bright red five-pointed star flew across from high altitude. Jia Yan was flying more than 500 meters above the train at this time. This distance is the most ideal distance. If there is any danger on the train, not only can he respond quickly, but he is also far enough away from the train that he will not disturb the humans inside. The speed of the train below actually feels a bit slow for today's big mosquitoes, so Jia Yan became a little impatient while following this slow train. But at this moment, Jia Yanfu's eyes lit up slightly as he saw the fighter jet flying in the distance. This fighter plane reflected a terrifying light in the sunlight. The direction it's going. Sure enough, it was Jia Yan's place. A fighter plane was actually dispatched to greet me. But one fighter plane is not enough, don't you think? Jia Yan watched the fighter jet approaching him, and only discovered it after it got closer. This is a relatively well-known fighter aircraft of China in recent years, namely the J-20. It is also said to be an existence that can compete with the fourth-generation fighters of other mainstream countries. However, this fighter plane has basically no actual combat test or pilot flight training. And the actual combat aspect has not been very much, so the actual combat effectiveness. It has been criticized by foreign countries. The two F-15s from Japan didn't do anything to me. Do you want to try your country's fighter jets this time? Jia Yanfu's eyes flickered slightly, the big mosquito at this time. Obviously, they are no longer so afraid of human flying weapons. Since he had the experience of shooting down two Japanese fourth-generation fighters, he has a certain judgment on the powerful human fighters. It's true that fighter jets are powerful. But compared to Jia Yan himself and the metal monster, his weakness lies in his lack of defense. Not to mention Jia Yan himself, they are metal monsters. Their defense power is not comparable to that of human fighters. And if Jia Yan is still afraid of human fighter jets after getting a fully evolved body, that would be the biggest joke in the world. Hey! You didn't come closer. After waiting for a moment, Jia Yan found that the fighter plane did not approach him directly, nor did it launch any air-to-air missiles. He couldn't help but be surprised. This fighter plane was not close to him, but passed directly from a relatively far distance. There was an experienced pilot on the fighter plane this time. This person encountered a big mosquito in the air and immediately implemented the plan according to the arrangements of his superiors. It turns out that the Chinese side, after seeing reports of several battles between giant mosquito monsters and metal monsters yesterday, have been making judgments that this giant mosquito monster has the possibility of winning over. Even if the other party cannot communicate, as long as they do not take the initiative to attack, according to the giant mosquito monster, the attitude towards humans has always been that at least there will be no offensive behavior towards humans. Therefore, the fighters at this time are to directly drive away. After all, it is absolutely impossible to let such a giant mosquito monster with amazing combat power go to a populous metropolis like Shanghai, so even if you don't want to become an enemy with the giant mosquito monster at this time, regarding relationships, we have to bite the bullet. But the other party didn't make any offensive moves, but they just kept driving them away at this time. Jia Yan glanced at the fighter jet. He made preparations for a fight, but the fighter jet kept circling there. If it didn't enter, Jia Yan felt a little strange. But after a moment, he roughly knew the other party's intention. They are just driving me away. But this is also possible. At this time, the Chinese side may not have judged whether I am the target of their elimination. After all, they have saved a child from Tumen City before, so at this time, they did not directly determine that I was an enemy. Jia Yan's compound eyes were dim and he looked at the fighter jet that had been circling beside him. Although he is not afraid, there is no reason to fight with the opponent at this time, not to mention that he still has a certain fondness for his former country. So this time he understood the other party's actions. Since his parents were also in this metropolis, and with the protection of the two killers, it shouldn't be easy for him to be in danger. Never mind. Now I can no longer sneak into Shanghai like before. This metropolis is really just a dream place for me to return to in the future. Jia Yan looked at the fighter plane briefly, then looked at the slowly leaving train, and sighed in his heart. Thousands of miles of farewell, it ends here. Perched in mid-air, Jia Yan watched the train slowly enter the city limits of Shanghai, its wings beating continuously. It was as if the fighter plane was nothing. This attitude made the fighter pilots a little angry, but thinking about the orders from above and the rumors that one of these giant mosquito monsters once shot down 2 Japanese Air Self-Defense Force F-15s in Japan, we can see the power of giant mosquitoes. The air combat effectiveness is still extremely strong, so I refrained from taking action at this time. Of course, if he had fought against the giant mosquitoes, he might have experienced why the 2 Japanese F-15s were shot down by the giant mosquitoes. That's no coincidence. But this big mosquito, I definitely have that strength. What's more, the current Jia Yan's combat effectiveness is much stronger than that of him at that time, and even his flight speed and reaction ability have been greatly enhanced. If there is really any human fighter to tease him now, he will really see it. What is the real king of the sky? But the fighter pilot didn't see it. Just after Jia Yan watched the train drive away, the fighter pilot became really impatient. Jia Yan finally took a look at this fighter jet. The pilot in the fighter plane also stared blankly. To fight or not to fight depends on what this giant mosquito monster does next. It would be best if we could avoid fighting. After all, this giant mosquito is really weird. As a creature, it has actually killed 2 F-15s that have no record of being shot down. There are 2 records of being shot down. The pilot still doesn't want to fight this monster if it's not absolutely necessary. Fortunately, the big mosquito seemed to hear the pilot's unwillingness to fight. A pair of wings on his ventral side shake violently. Yin yin yin. The giant mosquito turned around and flew away quickly in another direction of the sky. His speed exceeded the speed of sound almost instantly. Whistle, roar, roar. The acceleration speed of a large mosquito and the explosive power at that moment immediately made the fighter pilot stunned. He knew that if he got close to this giant mosquito at close range, he would not know how he died. After all, the acceleration strength of this giant mosquito had exceeded that of the fighter they were driving. Even for a long time, the giant mosquito, this kind of acceleration will be his strongest foundation for dominating the sky. Because no matter how powerful the fighter jets are developed by humans, they are limited by their own inability to carry excessive overload. When speeding up, they cannot reach the terrifying speed of giant mosquitoes. Therefore, at close range, giant mosquitoes are almost invincible. Fortunately, there was no fight with this big mosquito. The pilot broke out in a cold sweat. Not to mention the very lucky pilot, only Jia Yan, who left this place. Now that the parents' and little sister's affairs have been arranged, the remaining things are very simple. The light in Jia Yanfu's eyes became even more intense. That is, his path to continued promotion. Now that we have seen a promising path, there is no reason not to take it. Jia Yan saw the way to move forward in the blue-gray pebbles, but there were certain uncertainties in this path, so at this time, he did not choose those blue-gray pebbles easily. Just go to the Secret Research Institute in Shanghai, Tibet. Those 2 killers understand me and wrote down the address very clearly. Jia Yan's trip to Shanghai was actually only about 400 kilometers away from his hometown of Chang City in a straight line. It took Jia Yan an hour to return to the place where his laptop bag was hidden and then take it out. This notebook is almost out of power, but it can't stop Jia Yan at this time. Fujian province has fallen into the hands of metal monsters, and too many people have abandoned their homes. At this time, Chenchi has not turned into a place where metal monsters are raging, even because of Jia Yan's crazy fighting last night, but there are countless people who have abandoned their homes. Jia Yan was no longer afraid of being seen at this time. He was carrying a laptop bag and using his thermal exploration ability. When he saw an empty house, he just broke in. Then find the socket, plug it in, and start charging. It's actually very simple, isn't it? While charging, he turned on the laptop's power. Now search for the route to Qinghai Tibet and the places that need attention. After all, I am back to the cold north this time. I don't know if the temperature will have a great impact on me. I hope it won't. Jia Yan familiarly checked on the computer after turning it on. In fact, the purpose of going to Qinghai Tibet in the past was not just to get the chance to mutate next time. Jia Yan also wanted to know how far the research on metal monsters in that secret research institute had progressed. It would be best if there was information that he could use. Reborn as an interstellar giant mosquito. Author, Bulletin U. Chapter 211. After turning on the laptop, Jia Yan didn't start working directly. He was no longer so anxious, so he could check his information first. Since he returned to China, he has not read any news on the internet. After all, Jia Yan doesn't know the current war situation between the metal monsters and the Huaxia kingdom. If the Qinghai Tibet side has been completely invaded by the metal monsters, then he was also very dangerous in the past, so he must consider whether it is in the past. Got it? Jia Yan skillfully opened the web page and searched for information about metal monsters. As expected, the internet is full of news about metal monsters, and these news are all good news. What metal monsters can bring a century-old technological leap to mankind? What metal monsters are not a threat? Humans only need to study for a while. In time, they can be completely eliminated. As for the war, there is not much to hide. After all, there are so many refugees in various places, and it is impossible to hide it even if you want to. But the news about the fall of these cities one after another became less shocking when the government said they were not afraid of metal monsters. It was as if this war meant that humans would definitely win and gain something from the metal monsters. But people at this time do need some good things as a booster. Jia Yan doesn't think there is anything wrong with the Chinese government doing this. After all, he knows that during the war with the Japanese country, the people at that time battle reports are always exaggerated. If 1,000 enemies are killed, the front line commander will become 3,000, and the rear command will become 5,000. By the time it is reported to the national level, this number will have already killed 10,000 enemies. A major national event. War is like this, and it is not a wrong method. After all, the people and the officers and soldiers at the bottom need morale. In fact, at this time, there are many sober people on the internet, and these netizens post one after another. It's all a battle of analysis. The conclusion then reached was very depressing. The metal monsters only relied on one type to defeat the entire country of China. It is said that the metal monsters appearing in other countries are basically the same model. However, the metal monsters in China and the American continent are already very different. Does this mean that there are actually many types of metal monsters? And are there other metal monsters that haven't appeared yet? If a more powerful metal monster appears, so what should we do? Such speculations and topics are all over the internet. After all, this is a matter related to the entire war. Even experts and scholars have intervened in this topic, for these people. It's not that these topics attract me, but it's just a way to make myself famous, so at this time. There are not only many videos of various experts and professors on the internet, but also many analysis posts of related personnel. It is impossible to read them all. Jia Yan could only look for some popular articles and posts at random. As expected, metal monsters caused huge panic in the world. This was the first news that Jia Yan learned, and these metal monsters. It actually spread to every corner of the earth. He had a pensive expression. This matter was actually a bit beyond Jia Yan's own expectations. Although he had a vague guess about something similar when he saw the metal monster for the first time in Huaxia Kingdom, he really couldn't believe that this guess was correct. Now that the facts are before our eyes, it is as if the entire world has been plunged into a crisis of metal monsters. The development of this matter has simply made Jia Yan extremely surprised. Could it be that I lured the metal monster out of Mount Fuji because of this? With such a huge number of metal monsters, they will definitely appear in the future. Jia Yan always expressed doubts about the fact that he lured the metal monster out of the surface world. I feel a little self-blame, but after seeing the posts on the internet, this feeling has faded a little. After all, if the metal monsters were just accidentally released by him, then the number should not be so huge. This shows that these metal monsters, there should have been plans to attack the surface world a long time ago, otherwise how could such a huge army appear? But what exactly are metal monsters? Where did they come from? Is there a space beneath the ground similar to or even larger than the underground world in northern China? Jia Yan was thinking about such things, and he didn't know where his mind was going. Hey, there's someone talking about me here. Jia Yan scrolled and saw that some posts were actually discussing his big mosquito monster. He was a little interested to see what humans said about him. The giant mosquito monster has great fighting power. Witnesses said that in Fujian province, a giant mosquito monster that had never been seen before actually started a fierce battle with an army of thousands of metal monsters, and was destroying the metal. After killing more than 300 monsters, they walked away. This is nonsense. Others on the internet say it's impossible. It's not like giant mosquito monsters haven't appeared before. Their battles are all about close combat. If it's just close combat, it's possible that they won't be able to compete with those metal monsters. It's impossible to fight monsters. The above are all SB, the one fighting is me, I am God. Worship the third floor, the master of the third floor gently accepts my little brother's knees. SB on the third and fourth floors, but as for the poster's point of view, I also want to say that this thing is true. I contacted a friend who escaped from that place this morning. He said that he saw a giant mosquito fighting a metal monster with his own eyes. In this situation, I don't know if that giant mosquito is different from other giant mosquito monsters, but it actually has the ability to attack from a distance, and it's those attacks that killed the metal monster like that. I actually know people from the war zone on the 5th floor. What's going on there now? Some people say that the war zone has been completely wiped out. A lot of people have died. I tell you, from the 6th floor, metal monsters are monsters that kill everyone on sight. I escaped from a war zone. My hometown has been destroyed by metal monsters. More than hundreds of people died in front of me. It was killed by the metal monster. Pieces of news slipped through Jia Yan's eyes. Among these news, Jia Yan got a lot of news. After all, although he had previously guessed that the metal monsters were likely to launch military operations on a large scale, he did not expect that in just a short period of time, China and other countries in the world would become so terrifying. In 1 week, a rough estimate of the death toll reached more than 3 million people worldwide. And this rate is increasing at a rate of at least 500,000 people every day. The number of casualties in the Japanese country alone was more than 1 million. Although the casualties in other countries were also severe, because the metal monsters appeared later, the situation was much better than that in the Japanese country. But it can still be seen that the situation is not optimistic. Precisely because Jia Yan knows the true combat power of the metal monster, he reads a little nervousness in the articles published by the government, and even a little bit of fear in this nervousness. Jia Yan doesn't know what the top human beings are nervous about. Although humans are still at a disadvantage, the metal monster actually has many shortcomings. As long as these shortcomings are grasped, it shouldn't be difficult to defeat. Is there something else in this that has not been made public? When this idea came up, Jia Yan seemed to have caught some inspiration, but the inspiration came and went quickly. By the time he wanted to analyze it carefully, he couldn't think of anything else. At this time, Jia Yan had almost obtained the information, and he took another look at the area where the so-called secret research institution was located. Coincidentally, the vast ground over there is a place where there are no worries about metal monsters for the time being. Big Mosquito turned off the computer. He found that he, who was a little bit addicted to computers before, now had no idea of playing any games. After all, he was already a giant mosquito monster, and his life itself, it is full of suspense and is 100 times more fun than those online games. So he simply stopped looking at the computer. This thing was just a simple tool for the current mosquito. After Jia Yan turned off the computer, he found that it would take a long time for the power supply to be fully charged. So with a flash of his compound eyes, regardless of whether the family would protest in the future, with such a huge body, he walked to their sofa and then sat on it. Comfortable. Jia Yan discovered that human beings are indeed creatures that can enjoy themselves. He has not enjoyed this comfortable feeling since his rebirth. Moreover, this family seems to be a family with a good income. Even the sofa is made of genuine leather, which is very satisfying. Jia Yan enjoyed it a little. The big mosquito crawled down, its body hanging slightly on the soft sofa. He hadn't felt like this for a long time, and he was enjoying his rest. In the past, every time he took a rest, Big Mosquito had no choice but to get tired, so he would only do that if he found a bookstore. Moreover, he basically didn't need to sleep after being reborn. Now, he really hasn't experienced this feeling for a long time. The big mosquito is going to sleep. The light in his compound eyes faded away, and Jia Yan finally controlled his spirit and slowly entered a dormant state. After days of fighting, I am tired. Mentally tired, physically tired. So take a good rest. So the big mosquito fell asleep lightly on the sofa of this well-decorated family. The sofa is not too small, but it can still only accommodate more than half of Jia Yan's body. But even so, Big Mosquito is also very satisfied. Compared with those floors full of strange rocks and extremely chrome, this sofa is already heaven. Same place. The computer was placed on the ground for charging, and the breeze blew slowly, blowing the curtains. The sleeping posture of the big mosquito looked very harmonious. A sweet dream.